Robert Neighbors, Robert Simpson Neighbors, November 3, 1815, September 14, 1859, was an Indian agent and Texas state legislator. Known as a fair and determined protector of Indian interests as guaranteed by treaty, he was murdered for his beliefs by a Texan who disagreed with giving any rights to the Comanches. Early life. Robert Simpson Neighbors was born in Charlotte County, Virginia, on November 3, 1815. He was the sole son of William and Elizabeth Elam Neighbors. 7. In later life, he chose to drop the U from his last name. He was orphaned at a mere 4 months old when both parents died of pneumonia. 8. He was later educated by private tutors, who were retained by his guardian, Samuel Hamner, a Virginia planter. Immigration to Texas and Army service. Neighbors left Virginia at the age of 19, and while he stayed briefly in New Orleans, his intention was always to immigrate to Texas, which he did in the early spring of 1836. Romans 7. He joined the Army of the Republic of Texas on 30 January 1839 as a first lieutenant, commanding Fort Travis on Galveston Island. Capture by General Adrian Wool. On September 15, 1842, as a member of Captain John C. Hayes's company of volunteers, Neighbors was in San Antonio attending Judge Anderson Hutchinson's court when General Adrian Wool made his invasion of Texas and captured the city. 15. Along with approximately 16 other individuals, including the officers of the court, he was forcibly marched to Mexico, where he was subsequently imprisoned in San Carlos Fortress. 18. Indian agent and the field system. Neighbors was released on March 24, 1844, and returned to Texas. 23. He briefly operated the Mansion House Hotel in Houston before becoming Indian agent for the Republic of Texas on 12 February 1845. 24. Thomas G. Western, Texas Superintendent of Indian Affairs, and Neighbors as Indian agent for the Lipan Apaches and Tincawas, initiated a new policy. After the annexation of the Republic of Texas by the United States, Neighbors was a party to Treaty 246 between the U.S., represented by Indian Commissioners Pierce M. Butler and M. G. Lewis, and the chiefs of the Comanches, Ionis, Anadarkos, Caddos, Lipans, Tincawas, Quiches, Tawacanos. As a federal Indian agent for the Comanches, he continued what was then a most unusual practice, that of actually visiting the Indians in their homes and learning their language and culture. Called the field system, it was unique for its time. The ultimate result was that he spent much time far beyond the then frontier, and, in the opinion of historians, exercised greater influence over the Indians in Texas than any other white man of his generation. Indeed, other than Sam Houston, he probably was one of the few white men to bother to learn their language and culture, let alone travel to the heart of the Comancheria. Adoption by the Comanche. In 1845, as an Indian agent for the Republic of Texas, Robert Neighbors recorded one of the best-known meetings with the Penaka Comanche head chief Old Owl while visiting a Tonkawa camp. 27. Chief Old Owl arrived with 40 warriors, and in a manner the major called most insolent and domineering demanded that the Tonkawa feed the war party and their horses and provide for them entertainment. 27. The Tonkawas obeyed with alacrity, providing 40 of the best-looking Tonkawa maidens. 27. Neighbors, known as a fearless man, took this opportunity to be introduced to the Comanches. 27. Old Owl, introduced to Neighbors, first complimented him on his fine blue coat. 27. Neighbors, understanding the meaning of this compliment, presented the chief with the coat immediately. 27 other warriors admired his pants, boots, and other clothing, and soon Neighbors was standing only in a nightshirt. 27. Old Owl, however, took a liking to the fearless Neighbors. He told him though most whites irritated him, he liked Neighbors and invited him to accompany the war party, and he proposed, instead of Neighbors making a civilized man of him, that he would make a fine horse thief out of Neighbors and adopt him into the tribe. 27 Neighbors, feeling this was an opportunity few men would ever receive, accepted at once. 27 The war party went to Mexico, where Neighbors attempted to buy beef at a rancho. 27 When the Mexicans declined to sell beef to a Republic of Texas official on credit, Old Owl told them 2 beeves were to be forthcoming immediately, or the rancho would be burned down and all the beeves taken. 28 This proved highly effective, and the food was immediately forthcoming. 28 Neighbors, having left an indelible impression on Old Owl as the first and only Republic of Texas official to ever ride with a Comanche war party, took his leave of them with thanks and went home. 28 Neighbors' expedition. Early in the spring of 1849, Major General William J. Worth of the United States Army, who was in command of the 8th Military Department, which included the former Republic of Texas, was ordered by Secretary of War William L. Marcy to explore a wagon route between San Antonio and El Paso. 49 The general, headquartered in San Antonio, selected Neighbors to lead the expedition to establish the so-called upper route to El Paso. 113 His reasoning was that Neighbors was perhaps the only man in Texas who could safely ride into the Comancheria. Neighbors led a combined military ranger force that included his personal friend Rip Ford, 113, and did in fact map a route that not only became the route used by the Overland Stage Company, but is the same route taken by the highway today. Indeed, Neighbors reported 598 miles between Austin as the state capital and El Paso, exactly the same mileage listed today between the two cities. 83 In addition to Ford on the expedition, Neighbors was able to convince Buffalo Hump to lead it. 117 Pennaker Ward, Chief's Yellow Wolf, Buffalo Hump's cousin, and Santa Anna joined them along the trail. Though the chief later left the party, it remained under his protection, and Deconi Comanche head chief Tall Tree, or Guadalupe, led the party the remainder of the distance from the Colorado River to El Paso. 121 Neighbors' ability to communicate with the Comanche and his relationship with them made the expedition possible. Brazos Indian Reservation. In those days, appointments for such posts as federal Indian agent were determined in great part by the political party in power and the political affiliation of the agent. Neighbors was a Democrat, so his services as Indian agent were terminated by the elections and subsequent national Whig administration in September 1849. Neighbors stayed in public life, however. Appointed as a Texas commissioner, he was sent by Governor Peter Hansborough Bell to organize El Paso County in February and March 1850. 89-90 He then attempted, without success, to organize counties in New Mexico as a part of Texas, being opposed by Judge Job Houghton. 92 As a member of the 4th Texas legislature representing the Bixar and Medina district from 1851 to 1853. 102 He, along with Texas Senator Rip Ford, sponsored a resolution in 1852. 104 After urging from Secretary of War Jefferson Davis to Texas Governor Peter Hansborough Bell, the Texas legislature passed a law in 1854 granting 12 leagues of land for establishing those Indian reservations. 132 Neighbors became a presidential elector in 1852. 105 And following the election of Franklin Pierce in 1853, was appointed supervising agent of the Indian Service in Texas. 108 In 1854, Neighbors and Captain Randolph B. Marcy, with an escort of 40 soldiers, left Fort Belknap in search of recommended sites for the establishment of 2 Indian reservations in 1855. 134 The Caddo, Shawnee, Anadarko, Waco, Tawakano, and Tunkawa were located. 121 The reservation's log buildings included the agent's house, an office, a commissary store, a laborer's house, a school, a blacksmith, interpreter's house, a privy, a spring house, plus several dome-shaped thatched native houses. 164. Camp Cooper and the Comanche Indian Reservation. The Pennaca Comanches were located on the Comanche Indian Reservation located on the Clear Fork Brazos River, about 10 miles southwest of what is now Throckmorton in Throckmorton County. The reservation log cabin buildings included the agent's house, commissary store, laborer's house, a school, and Chief Ketumsee's house, plus the tribal members' tents. 164 providing defense for the reservation was Camp Cooper. 122 founded on January 3, 1856 by Major William J. Hardee and named in honor of Samuel Cooper. The camp was commanded by Lieutenant Colonel Robert E. Lee of the 2nd Cavalry from 1856 to 1857. 169. 186. In a letter dated Camp Cooper, 12 April 1856, he wrote, "We are in the Comanche Reserve with the Indian camps below us on the river, belonging to Cotumsee's band, whom the government is trying to humanize. It will be uphill work, I fear. Cotumsee has been to see me, and we have had a talk, very tedious on his part, and very sententious on mine. I hailed him as a friend, as long as his conduct, and that of his tribe deserved it, but would meet him as an enemy the first moment he failed to keep his word." Officers serving under Lee's command at the camp included Captain Earl Van Dorn, Captain George Stoneman, and Captain Theodore O'Hara. Major George H. Thomas succeeded Lee as commander and was wounded while pursuing Comanche warriors. 28. The camp of 250 men under the command of Captain S. D. Carpenter was abandoned to Colonel W. C. Dalrymple, Texas troops on 21 February 1861, after General David E. Twiggs agreed to surrender all federal military posts. 30. Death. It was during this period, when settlers began to attack the Indians, that Neighbors became hated among white Texans. Neighbors alleged that the United States Army officers located at the posts of Fort Belknap and Camp Cooper, near the reservations, failed to give adequate support to him and his resident agents, and adequate protection to the Indians and settlers alike. 189. The military's attitude was shared by the settlers, who believed the reservation Indians were committing continuing raids on white settlements. 186. In spite of continuous threats against his life, Neighbors never faltered in his determination to protect the Indians. The main source of opposition to Major Neighbors and the reservation policy was John R. Baylor, the former Comanche agent, apparently blamed Major Neighbors for his dismissal and resented him bitterly, arousing public opinion to oust the major. Destroying the reservation. 194-95. With the aid of federal troops, Neighbors managed a 240-43, convinced, however, that the Indians, especially the Comanche, would never be safe in Texas due to the continuing raids of those bands still resisting white settlement of the Comancheria. He determined to move all Indians to safety in the Indian Territories. At 232 in August 1859, he and 4 companies of troops under Major George H. Thomas succeeded in moving 1420 Indians without loss of life to a new reservation in Indian Territory. A 272-75 attacked while returning to Texas. Neighbors' party headed for Fort Belknap with Colonel Leeper as a casualty. At 282, Neighbors proceeded to the nearby village of Belknap the next morning to wind up his accounts as Superintendent of Indian Affairs, where on September 14, 1859, while Neighbors was speaking with 2 men, he was shot in the back by Edward Cornett. At 283, historians believe the assassination was a direct result of Neighbors' actions protecting the Comanche. He was buried in the civilian cemetery at Fort Belknap. Personal life. Robert Simpson Neighbors was a Methodist, a Mason, and a leader in the temperance movement. He had married Elizabeth Ann Mays in Seguin, Texas on July 15, 1851, and their home was on his Salado Creek ranch, now part of San Antonio, Texas. 101 two sons survived childhood.